I used to think my life was perfect. I really did. My name is Emily Parker, I'm 32, and until a few years ago, I believed in fairy tale marriages, lifelong friendships, and that people you love the most would never hurt you. I lived in a cozy suburb just outside Chicago in a house Michael and I bought together shortly after we got married. It wasn't a mansion, but it had enough space for the two of us, and it was filled with sunlight during the mornings, a little slice of happiness I clung to. Michael, he was everything I thought I wanted. Tall, easygoing, career-focused, with that kind of charm that made strangers immediately like him. People loved him. I loved him. We had been together for 8 years before we married, and I thought I knew him inside out. Then there was Jessica, my best friend since college. We shared dorm rooms, heartbreaks, late night study sessions, and secrets we swore we'd never tell anyone. She was like a sister to me, confident, witty, and magnetic. She could light up a room with her laugh. Michael liked her too. Hell, I trusted her with my life. For a while, life was simple and predictable in the best way. Weekends were for brunches with friends, family dinners, and casual nights curled up on the couch watching old movies. Michael worked a lot, but he always made time for me. Jess and I had a weekly ritual: Friday nights, pizza, wine, and hours of gossip that made us forget the world outside. But then, little things started slipping through the cracks. At first, I ignored them. Michael coming home a few minutes late without calling, Jess canceling our Friday night plans at the last minute with flimsy excuses, a glance shared between them that lingered just a second too long. I remember one Friday in particular. I had been waiting for Jessica to come over for our usual night. Around 7, Michael said he had to run an errand downtown. He left, and about 30 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Jess. "Hey, sorry, can't make it tonight. Family stuff." It was out of character for her. She never canceled, especially not on me. And somehow, I felt a tiny, gnawing pit in my stomach, a feeling I couldn't quite shake. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe she had family obligations I didn't know about. Maybe Michael was busy. Maybe I was just tired. But that night, sitting on the couch alone, I caught myself replaying the little things. The way Michael's smile sometimes didn't reach his eyes, the way Jess laughed a little too loudly when he was around, the way my phone notifications seemed to spike when they were together. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination. I had no idea that the seeds of betrayal were already planted, quietly, carefully, in places I trusted the most. And I had no idea that this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would turn my life upside down. The next few weeks, I tried harder to convince myself I was imagining things, but little cracks kept appearing in the life I thought was perfect. Michael started staying later at work, or so he said. He would get defensive if I asked simple questions like who he had lunch with or why he wasn't answering texts as quickly as usual. I remember one evening vividly. I called him twice during the afternoon, and both times he didn't pick up. When he walked in the door hours later, he hugged me tightly and said, "Busy day, sorry, Em." I should have felt reassured, I guess, but instead there was a flicker of unease I couldn't ignore. Something about the way he avoided eye contact made my chest tighten. I told myself, it's fine, don't overthink it. But the mind has a funny way of noticing patterns even when we try to ignore them. Then there was Jessica. She started making casual, almost offhand comments that felt strange. Little things she never used to say. Like one afternoon at a coffee shop, she leaned in and said, "You know, sometimes Michael seems different around me than he does with you." I laughed it off, thinking she was joking, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. The turning point, though, was subtle. One Saturday, I stayed late at work for a project. Michael called to check in. His tone was unusually light, almost flippant. Hey, just grabbing a drink with Yes. Don't wait up. I froze. My stomach sank. What do you mean with Jess? But I didn't say anything. I didn't want to seem controlling or paranoid. I smiled and said, okay, have fun. Be safe. But inside, the little knot of suspicion started tightening. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the things I had brushed off, the missed calls, the strange glances, Jess canceling our Friday night plans. None of it made sense if I trusted them. Over the next few days, I began paying closer attention. Michael started leaving his phone unlocked on the counter more often, not because he forgot, but I don't know. Something about the way he casually set it down made me uneasy. And then the subtle things added up. A text from an unknown number, a muted phone buzzing when he thought I wasn't watching, an extra pillow on the couch that hadn't been there before. I started writing notes to myself, small reminders of patterns I noticed, little things that felt wrong, even if I couldn't yet name them. And then, one evening, I caught a fleeting glimpse that made my heart drop. Michael and Jessica were at the kitchen table laughing at something on his laptop. Not the friendly kind of laughter. Something private, intimate. Something that shouldn't have existed between my husband and my best friend. I backed away silently, pretended I hadn't seen anything. But I knew, deep down, that what I had just witnessed wasn't nothing. It was the first crack in the wall of trust I had built around my marriage and my friendship. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Part of me wanted to yell, scream, demand the truth. But another part, the part that had always been careful, observant, strategic, told me to wait, watch, gather evidence. Because I had a feeling that if I acted impulsively, I might lose more than just my temper. And that's when the real nightmare began. After that evening, I couldn't stop noticing the little things. They weren't obvious at first, just whispers of something off, but they piled up until I couldn't ignore them. Michael started coming home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine, though he would insist he had been at the office all day. Jess suddenly seemed to be too busy to hang out with me, yet she posted photos on social media with Michael in the background, casually cropping me out. I began keeping track in my mind, every missed call, every unexplained outing, every laugh shared behind my back. It was exhausting, trying to convince myself I was imagining things, but deep down, I knew I wasn't. One night, I noticed Michael had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter. It was an accident, I think, or maybe carelessness. I shouldn't have looked, I know, but I caught a glimpse of a message that made my blood run cold. It wasn't explicit, nothing obscene, but the words were flirty, familiar, intimate in a way I had only ever shared with him. Can't wait to see you tonight. Miss you. The sender? Jess. I sank into a chair, trying to breathe. My mind raced. How long has this been going on? Were they just texting or more? I felt my hands shake, my chest tighten. The betrayal wasn't just a fear anymore. It was real, staring me in the face. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Part of me wanted to yell, scream, demand the truth, but another part, the part that had always been careful, observant, strategic, told me to wait, watch, gather evidence, because I had a feeling that if I acted impulsively, I might lose more than just my temper. And that's when the real nightmare began. After that evening, I couldn't stop noticing the little things. They weren't obvious at first, just whispers of something off, but they piled up until I couldn't ignore them. Michael started coming home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine, though he would insist he had been at the office all day. Jess suddenly seemed to be too busy to hang out with me, yet she posted photos on social media with Michael in the background, casually cropping me out. I began keeping track in my mind, every missed call, every unexplained outing, every laugh shared behind my back. It was exhausting, trying to convince myself I was imagining things, but deep down, I knew I wasn't. One night, I noticed Michael had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter. It was an accident, I think, or maybe carelessness. I shouldn't have looked, I know, but I caught a glimpse of a message that made my blood run cold. It wasn't explicit, nothing obscene, but the words were flirty, familiar, intimate in a way I had only ever shared with him. Can't wait to see you tonight. Miss you. The sender? Jess. I sank into a chair, trying to breathe. My mind raced. How long has this been going on? Were they just texting or more? I felt my hands shake, my chest tighten. The betrayal wasn't just a fear anymore. It was real, staring me in the face. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Part of me wanted to yell, scream, demand the truth. But another part, the part that had always been careful, observant, strategic, told me to wait, watch, gather evidence. Because I had a feeling that if I acted impulsively, I might lose more than just my temper. And that's when the real nightmare began. I still remember the day I found the evidence I couldn't ignore. It wasn't planned. I wasn't snooping, at least not consciously. But fate has a way of forcing the truth into your lap. I was at Michael and Jess's shared office space one Saturday afternoon. Michael had forgotten his laptop at home, and I was helping him with a work project, something simple, just organizing files. I opened the folder he had left open on the desktop, and that's when I saw it. A folder named Us. At first, I froze. My heart was hammering so loudly, I thought someone might hear it. I clicked. Inside were photos, screenshots of messages, little notes they had sent to each other, texts that left no room for doubt, heat emojis, flirty jokes, weekend plans, plans that excluded me entirely. I sank into the chair. My hands were shaking. Every smile, every laugh, every innocent comment I had ever brushed off now hit me like a punch to the chest. They had been careful, but not careful enough. Not careful enough for someone who had been watching closely. I didn't cry. Not yet. I felt hollow, betrayed in the deepest, most intimate way. My best friend and my husband, people I trusted more than anyone, had built a secret life right under my nose. I realized something chilling. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a fling that would end soon. They were entwined in a web of lies, and I had been blind to it all along. I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I just sat there letting the truth sink in. And that's when I made a decision. I wouldn't lose myself in anger or despair. I would watch. I would collect evidence. And when the time came, they would see exactly what they had done, and I would walk away stronger. But I had no idea how far this betrayal would grow or the shocking truths I was about to uncover along the way. I wanted to scream, to confront them immediately, but the part of me that had always been observant, the part that never reacted impulsively, kicked in. I couldn't let them know I knew. Not yet. I needed proof. I needed control. So I started collecting everything. Screenshots of texts, emails, photos, notes. Every little piece of evidence that proved the betrayal beyond a shadow of a doubt. I even started keeping a journal of small things I observed, the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching, the tiny gestures, the subtle touches that only made sense now. Every time I added a piece of evidence to my collection, a strange combination of pain and empowerment coursed through me. Pain because the people I loved most had lied to me. Empowerment because, for the first time in months, I felt like I had some control over the situation. I still didn't confront them. Instead, I let the evidence accumulate, letting the weight of the betrayal sink deeper into my chest. Every time I saw them together, every casual laugh, every touch, it was fuel. Fuel for a plan I hadn't fully formed yet. And that's when I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about cheating. There were layers here I couldn't yet see. Secrets hidden beneath secrets. And I had a feeling that when I peeled back the next layer, my life would change forever. I didn't know it then, but that day, the day I discovered undeniable proof, was the day my life truly split into before and after. After discovering the evidence, I felt like I was walking through a fog. I couldn't focus at work, I barely ate, and sleep became a stranger. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Michael and Jess together, laughing, texting, planning their secret world, one that I had unknowingly been a part of until now. At first, I wanted to confront them immediately. I imagined screaming, throwing things, demanding the truth, shattering everything in sight. But another voice inside me stopped me. Not yet. Don't give them the satisfaction. Wait. Watch. Plan. I realized then that anger wasn't going to help me. Reacting impulsively might make me feel better for a moment, but it wouldn't give me justice. It wouldn't make them feel the weight of what they had done. And I needed them to feel it. So I started quietly building my strategy. I kept a folder on my phone, hidden behind a password, filled with screenshots, photos, and messages. I recorded patterns of behavior, the times they were too busy together, the text threads that didn't make sense, the little lies Michael told that I had always overlooked. I also began thinking about their social circle, mutual friends who trusted me, people who would be shocked if they knew the truth. I realized that exposing them to the right audience, people whose opinions matter to them, could be far more powerful than a confrontation in private. At the same time, I had to keep up appearances. I smiled at Michael, laughed with Jess, acted normal in social settings. Every lie they had told me, I mirrored back with my own mask of calm. It was exhausting, but necessary. I didn't want them to suspect that I knew. There were moments when the weight of it all crushed me. Driving home, I would cry in the car, gripping the steering wheel, questioning everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and trust. At night, I would stare at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every laugh, every shared secret, and realizing that so many of them had been stolen from me. And yet, somewhere in that storm of emotions, a part of me began to feel strong. I had always believed in myself, even when I doubted others. I had a mind sharp enough to notice patterns, careful enough to collect evidence, and the patience to wait. I realized that this betrayal, as devastating as it was, could be transformed into something that gave me power instead of destroying me. I made a silent promise that night. I would not let them break me. I would rise above the pain. I would reclaim my life, and I would do it on my own terms. Little did I know, the steps I was taking quietly, silently, were about to trigger a chain of events that neither Michael or Jess could have anticipated. A chain that would unravel their carefully constructed lies brick by brick. And that's when I realized watching, waiting, and planning was only the beginning. For weeks, I moved quietly, almost invisibly. Every piece of evidence I had collected was cataloged, time-stamped, and backed up. I wasn't acting out for revenge, not in the way most people imagine, but in a calculated way that would ensure the truth had consequences. I started with our closest friends, people whose opinions Michael and Jess valued. I didn't send them everything at once. I shared carefully curated screenshots, short text exchanges, and hints that something wasn't right. The reactions were subtle at first. Raised eyebrows, awkward glances, half-asked questions. But I could feel the ripple starting. Then came the next step. At a casual dinner with our friend group, I slipped in a story, a personal anecdote about trust and betrayal. Carefully worded, general enough that it didn't accuse anyone directly. But the message hit its mark. Jess's face went pale, and Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair. It was almost too easy to see their guilt without saying a word. I watched them in quiet fascination. For the first time, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. Not cruel satisfaction, exactly, but the calm realization that the web of lies they had spun was beginning to unravel on its own. Then I escalated. I sent a private message to one of Jess's closest friends, someone I knew would confront her and demand an explanation. I didn't have to say much. A screenshot, a single line of text. "I think you should see this." The response came almost immediately. "Jessica, what is this?" I didn't watch the conversation directly, but the panic I sensed from Jess through the subtle hints in later interactions was intoxicating. For the first time, she wasn't in control. Michael, too, was on edge. He started calling more frequently, asking innocuous questions, trying to gauge if I had discovered everything. And I let him think I didn't. Every interaction became a test, a careful dance of appearances. I laughed at dinner parties, smiled in selfies, joked with friends, while quietly knowing that I held the power in my hands. They had underestimated me. They thought their affair could remain hidden forever. Then came the night of the big reveal, though I didn't plan it like that. I was at a small gathering at a mutual friend's house when someone approached me privately, holding their phone. Jess's texts to Michael, fully visible, with timestamps, screenshots, everything. The friend whispered, "I didn't know who else to tell. I think you need to see this." I felt a mixture of vindication, sorrow, and disbelief. I didn't gloat, I didn't scream. I simply took the phone, glanced at the screen, and felt the pieces click into place. Their secret life, the one they had tried so hard to hide, was now out in the open to someone whose opinion mattered. By the end of the night, whispers started circulating in the friend group. Questions began being asked. People who had trusted Michael and Jess started looking at them differently. I didn't have to say a word. The truth was doing the work for me. But even as I watched their carefully constructed world begin to crumble, I knew this was just the beginning. The real confrontation, the one that would leave them exposed and unable to deny anything, was still ahead. And I couldn't help but smile a little, knowing that when that moment came, they wouldn't know what hit them. The reactions didn't take long. Once whispers reached Michael and Jess, I began to notice the cracks in their composed facades. Jess, who had always been so confident, suddenly looked over her shoulder in public, avoiding eye contact with me. Michael's charming ease started to falter. His jokes felt forced, his smiles strained. The first real confrontation happened at a mutual friend's dinner party. I had gone expecting a casual night with friends, nothing more. But within an hour, the atmosphere shifted. Jess tried to corner me in the kitchen, her voice a mixture of panic and anger. "Emily, can we talk?" she asked, eyes darting nervously. I smiled politely, keeping my tone neutral. "Sure, Jess. About what?" She faltered, then blurted, "You know, about Michael." I didn't answer immediately. I let her words hang in the air. She leaned closer, whispering, "It wasn't supposed to be like this. We didn't mean—" I cut her off softly, but firmly. "You mean you didn't mean to get caught?" Her face went pale. I realized in that moment she wasn't used to being confronted calmly, without screaming, without tears. And Michael, who had been hovering nearby, finally stepped in, trying to defuse the situation. "Emily, she started, but I held up a hand. "No, Michael, you don't get to start this conversation. Not now, not after everything." They both froze, caught in a web they couldn't untangle. The tension in the room was palpable. Even our friends noticed. There were whispers, sidelong glances, awkward silences. Jess tried to smile nervously, but it didn't reach her eyes. Michael kept shifting, unable to find words that would excuse what had already been exposed. Over the next few days, the confrontations multiplied. Friends began asking questions directly. "Michael, is this true? Jess, how could you?" And with every question, the walls they had built around themselves started crumbling. They were forced to explain, to lie, to squirm, and I remained calm, collected, letting their panic unfold naturally. I won't lie, watching it all was painful in its own way. But I also felt a strange sense of justice. They had stolen my trust, my friendship, and my peace of mind. Now the social consequences of their choices were finally catching up to them. Even in the midst of this chaos, I kept my plan in mind. I didn't attack them publicly. I didn't raise my voice at every opportunity. I allowed the truth to surface slowly, strategically, ensuring that the damage to their reputations was real and lasting. And yet I knew the worst was still to come. There were layers to this betrayal I hadn't fully uncovered, and the next revelation would shake them and everyone around them more than anything they had experienced so far. Because once lies are exposed, the ripple effect doesn't stop with just one person. Once the truth started slipping out, I watched from the sidelines as the careful world Michael and Jess had built began to collapse. Friends who had once adored them suddenly looked at them differently, some with disbelief, others with judgment, and a few with quiet, simmering anger. It started small. Invitations stopped coming. At first, I noticed it when RSVPs were ignored, or when I got messages asking why Michael and Jess hadn't been showing up to regular gatherings. Friends who used to text them daily now only texted me, asking quietly if I was okay, if I had known what was happening. The shift in the social landscape was subtle but undeniable. Then came the whispered conversations. Mutual friends would pull me aside at parties, cafes, and even at work events, saying things like, "I didn't know what to say before, but we all knew something was off." They told me how they'd noticed Jess canceling plans, Michael sneaking messages, and the strange tension that had been building for months. Every story they shared reinforced what I already knew and validated the strategy I had been following all along. One evening, at a casual get-together, it reached a peak. Jess tried to enter the room confidently, but friends who had once admired her laughed nervously and whispered behind her back. Michael attempted to talk to one of our mutual friends, only to be met with a cold stare and a curt, "I think we need some space." I could see the panic start to spread across their faces. Jess's usual jokes and laughter had vanished, replaced with a nervous twitch, a tension in her shoulders that hadn't been there before. Michael's charm, once disarming, now felt hollow. Every word he said was measured, defensive, and strained. And the social media fallout was merciless. Someone had shared subtle hints of their betrayal online. Not explicit details, just enough to raise questions. Mutual friends tagged posts about trust, loyalty, and betrayal. Jess's followers began asking questions. Michael's friends stopped engaging with his posts. Every corner of the digital world they once controlled felt like a mirror reflecting their deception back at them. I didn't post a single thing. I didn't have to. The evidence, once shared discreetly with the right people, did the work on its own. It was fascinating and painful to watch. The carefully curated lives they had built, the image of perfection they projected, crumbling under the weight of their lies. Even more satisfying and subtle was seeing the whispers spread into their professional lives. Michael's colleagues began noticing his distracted demeanor. Jess's friends at her workplace whispered about her constant cancellations, her nervous energy, the secrets she clearly couldn't contain. Soon, casual acquaintances who had never been involved in our lives started noticing too. Their reputation was slowly but surely unraveling. I felt a mixture of relief, grief, and, dare I admit it, a quiet satisfaction. Not revenge in a violent sense, but the kind of justice that comes when lies are exposed, when truth finds its way into every corner, when people who hurt you realize the consequences of their actions are real and lasting. Yet, as I watched their lives crumble, a small, uncomfortable thought lingered. I wasn't entirely done yet. There were still layers of betrayal I hadn't uncovered. Michael had been keeping secrets beyond the affair, financial deceptions, hidden messages, and decisions that affected me and our life together. Jess, too, had been manipulating more than just our friendship, subtly influencing friends, family, and social circles in ways I hadn't fully realized. The next stage, I knew, would expose all of it. I had been patient so far, but patience only goes so far before the truth demands to be revealed completely. And when that moment came, it wouldn't just be a private unraveling, it would be public, undeniable, and irreversible. For the first time in months, I felt a strange sense of calm. I had survived the shock, the heartbreak, the sleepless nights. I had collected evidence, strategized, and allowed the social consequences to begin their work. And I knew, deep down, that the most satisfying part was yet to come. Because by the time this was over, Michael and Jess wouldn't just face the whispers, they'd face the full weight of the life they had tried to hide. And I would be free, stronger, and finally in control of my own story. But even as I envisioned that moment, I couldn't shake one lingering fear. What else had they been hiding from me? After weeks of tension, awkward confrontations, and whispered judgments circulating among friends and colleagues, I finally allowed myself a deep breath. The storm wasn't over, but I could feel the tide shifting. Michael and Jess were crumbling under the weight of their own lies, and I was beginning to reclaim pieces of myself that had been buried under heartbreak. It started small. I began spending more time alone, rediscovering the hobbies and passions I had sidelined for years. I joined a book club, something I had loved in college, and found solace in the quiet, absorbing rhythm of reading again. I took long walks in the park near our house, letting the crisp air clear my mind. It felt like reclaiming my body and my space, something no betrayal could touch. Work became my sanctuary. I threw myself into projects, not as a distraction, but as a way to rebuild confidence. My colleagues noticed the change. I was sharper, more focused, more composed. It was strange, almost empowering, to realize that the very people who had caused me so much pain had inadvertently forced me to rediscover my own strength. Socially, I started to redefine my circles. Friends who had distanced themselves from the drama returned once they saw I wasn't spiraling. I spent time with people who genuinely cared, who supported me without judgment. And for the first time in months, I felt laughter again. Not the hollow kind I had forced in public, but real, deep, healing laughter. I also took control of my own living situation. I moved certain things around the house, reclaimed spaces that had felt invaded by betrayal. I replaced old pictures with new memories, painted walls I had ignored, and slowly the home that had once been a stage for deception began to feel like my sanctuary again. And as I rebuilt, I noticed subtle shifts in Michael and Jess's world. They weren't just facing social consequences, they were visibly unraveling. Mutual friends would tell me about awkward encounters, questions asked too loudly in public, and invitations being rescinded. Jess, who had always been the center of attention in our circle, now found herself isolated. Michael, once so confident, looked fragile, constantly trying to patch the cracks he couldn't repair. I felt no joy in their suffering, not the kind that comes from cruelty, but a quiet acknowledgement that justice had found them. And more importantly, I felt proud of myself, proud that I hadn't reacted impulsively, proud that I had maintained my dignity, proud that I had allowed truth to do the work. Slowly, I started envisioning a future for myself that had nothing to do with Michael or Jess. I considered new career opportunities, explored travel plans I had always postponed, and even thought about dating again someday. Not because I needed someone, but because I wanted to live fully, without fear or betrayal shadowing my choices. By the time the social fallout had reached its peak, I realized something profound. The betrayal had not broken me. It had forced me to rebuild myself from the inside out, stronger, more aware, and unapologetically in control of my life. And though the scars would remain, a reminder of the pain I endured, I knew I had transformed. I had turned a nightmare into a catalyst for growth, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. But even as I rebuilt, a small part of me knew that the final closure, the complete unraveling of their deception, was still coming. And when that day arrived, It would leave no doubt in anyone's mind about what they had done and who had survived it. By the time the final pieces fell into place, Michael and Jess were no longer the people I once knew. Their carefully constructed lives, the illusion of perfection they had worked so hard to maintain, had completely crumbled. It started with work. Michael's colleagues, who had long suspected something, finally confronted him directly. Rumors had spread beyond our social circle, and the professional fallout hit harder than I expected. He was called into meetings, questioned about behavior and missed deadlines, and his reputation, once immaculate, was now tarnished. I heard from a mutual friend that his boss had given him a warning, a serious one. No charm, no excuses could fix this. Jess fared no better. Friends who had been loyal to her for years started cutting ties. Invitations stopped coming, messages went unanswered, and even her family began noticing the strain in her behavior. The confidence that had always defined her was replaced by a nervous, almost desperate energy. The whispers of betrayal had become loud enough that everyone could hear them, even if they weren't directly involved. And the most satisfying part, neither of them could deny it anymore. The evidence I had collected, the quiet exposure through friends and social channels, had set the stage. Every time they tried to explain or excuse themselves, someone produced a screenshot, a message, or a photo, proof that couldn't be argued with. Their whys were laid bare, exposed to everyone who mattered to them. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. Watching them unravel was bittersweet. There was sadness, of course, grief for the life I thought we had, for the friendship that had ended in betrayal, but there was also a deep, quiet satisfaction. I had survived. I had maintained my integrity, and most importantly, I had reclaimed control over my own story. I remember one evening sitting on my porch with a glass of wine, looking at the sunset. Michael's name crossed my mind briefly, Jess's too, and then I smiled. Not bitterly, but peacefully. I realized that their destruction wasn't my doing alone. It was the natural consequence of their choices. Lies have a way of catching up. I walked away while keeping my dignity intact. I had rebuilt my life, my confidence, my happiness, and I knew, finally, that I didn't need anyone to validate me. I had survived betrayal, heartbreak, and deception, and come out stronger on the other side. Even so, one lesson lingered in my mind. Trust is fragile, and those who betray it will eventually face the consequences. I had learned to protect myself, to observe carefully, and to never let anyone's deception define me. And as I closed my eyes that night, I felt a sense of closure that I hadn't thought possible. The nightmare was over, but the growth, the strength, and the resilience I had discovered would stay with me forever. It's been months since everything unfolded. Michael and Jess are now shadows of the people I once knew, isolated, judged, and living with the consequences of their choices. And me? I'm free. Free from betrayal, free from the anxiety that had haunted my every thought, and free from the illusion of perfection. I've rebuilt my life, brick by brick, discovering a strength I didn't know I had. I'm focused on my career, my passions, my friends who truly matter, and, most importantly, myself. I often think about trust, how fragile it is, and how devastating it can be when broken. But I also think about resilience. I realize that life doesn't always hand you closure or justice on a silver platter. Sometimes you have to gather the pieces yourself, carefully, strategically, and with patience. And when you do, the satisfaction isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming your own power. Looking back, I can see the subtle signs I ignored, the little cracks that eventually became chasms. I can see how my love and trust were taken for granted, and I've learned that it's okay to protect yourself, to observe carefully, and to act with intention rather than impulse. I also think about forgiveness, not the kind that erases what happened, but the kind that allows you to move forward without letting the past define you. I don't hate Michael or Jess.
I don't dwell on their downfall. I simply accept that their actions were their own, and that my responsibility was to protect myself, my dignity, and my future. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who survived heartbreak and betrayal, who didn't crumble under the weight of lies, and emerged not just intact, but empowered. Life goes on. Friends who matter stay. Family who supports you strengthens you, and the future, well, it belongs to you if you are brave enough to claim it. I tell this story not to shame anyone, not to boast, but to share a truth I learned the hard way. People will betray you. Life will test you, but you are stronger than you realize. And sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply rising above the pain and living well. Because in the end, walking away, walking forward, and thriving, that's the victory that matters.